Hola, muy buen día, muy buenas tardes, noches para todos los que nos ven en Maildo en Latinoamérica. Escríbenos aquí en los comentarios desde qué país nos estás viendo. En el día de hoy tenemos unos invitados muy especiales desde Estados Unidos, Seattle. Son maestros en Shibari, en artes marciales, que nos quieren dar a conocer en el día de hoy muestra de lo que es la cultura, sobre todo la cultura japonesa en relación al Shibari. Y por supuesto conocemos de buena manera que los vamos a tener de invitados en Colombia muy pronto y queremos saber un poco más de ellos, saber un poco más de su artes. Entonces, le damos la bienvenida a Jonathan y Sappho, que nos están acompañando el día de hoy. Bienvenidos.
Ah, gracias, gracias, mucho gusto.
Bueno, para dar como inicio a unas preguntas que tenemos preparadas aquí para los dos, quisiéramos saber cómo conectaron los primeros estudios de artes marciales, porque sabemos que sus inicios fueron más orientados en artes marciales, con la transición hacia el Chivari.
So, I started doing martial arts, Japanese martial arts, when I was about 12 years old. And I started with judo. So, which is, as you know, it's like an art of throwing and pinning people down and that kind of thing. And then in my teens, when I was about 15 or so, I got very interested in I guess what you would call classical martial arts. And in Japan, they call these koryu or kobudo, which means old martial arts or old traditions. And so these koryu, the emphasis there's no competition, there's no belts. For example, like black belt or purple belt or brown belt, and there's no competition. The emphasis is on kata. Okay, so kata. So doing prearranged forms, usually with a partner. And there's a tremendous amount of emphasis on psychology and breath and body movement and intent. And I went to Japan. I started going to Japan for about a month every summer and practicing. And I was practicing an old fashioned style of jujitsu, which is very different than modern Brazilian jiu-jitsu or modern jiu-jitsu. Old fashioned jiu-jitsu tends to be kata based and also to often use weapons like knives, short metal clubs, these kinds of things, and also rope. So the tradition that I was studying had as part of its curriculum what is called Torinawa Jitsu or Hojo Jitsu, and that is this traditional martial art of binding an opponent with a piece of rope to capture them, to take them alive. At the time that I was studying that, I didn't have any interest in kink at all, but I did find the sort of elaborate and often kind of geometric patterns of rope on the body and the kata to be very interesting. So just sort of when I met my teacher Kinoko Hajime later in 2015 in Canada, it was not a big jump for me at all to start going to Japan to study Shibari with him. So that was not an obstacle or was not intimidating.
Ok. ¿Qué aprendizajes de las artes marciales japonesas sigues aplicando hoy en día en la práctica de Chivari?
Quite a bit actually, quite a bit, and I would say a lot of it has to do with martial arts, classical martial arts are not, especially, I would say, especially classical martial arts, are not actually organized. They're not actually organized around techniques per se. It's more that practicing kata in a correct fashion with a partner allows you to get an understanding of certain key ideas and skills. And so some of those really important key ideas that I think really apply to my own application of Kinbaku is really paying attention to distance, right? What we call maybe a better way to say it would be interval. what is the interval between two people? And more than that, what I would call the critical interval. What is the essential interval, and how do you arrive at that distance, at that interval with the other person at the correct timing? So this to me really, I think, and I think I could, Sappho would probably agree with this. We don't think of rope as an art of knots. We think of it as an art of movement, movement between two people. So understanding timing, where you are in relation to the person, and especially the critical, what I would call the critical distance, what we call moai in Japanese. The important thing about that is that moai is not just physical distance. It's also impacted by the skill level of both people. Maybe in the terms of rope, skill level is not relevant here, but the what is the psychological state of both people? What is their emotional state? And so to really understand what the correct distance is between the two of you, you need to understand, perceive what their emotional state is accurately. And that will affect what I would call irini, like to enter. Like what is, as you, especially the first moment that you start tying, how do you go from here we are, two of us, and I'm holding a piece of rope, to I am starting to tie you. That first moment, that what I would call the entry to go in, is so crucial, both in classical martial arts and also, to me, very much in rope. Maybe some other important concepts I would say that I just
Yeah.
apply naturally. One is what we call awaseru, which means sort of to match someone. If you look at for example, many people, and I'm sure in Colombia too, are familiar with this martial art called
Mm,
aikido. Aikido is
mm,
it's a modern martial art. It's not classical martial arts. But the word in aikido, I means awaseru, and that means to understand someone's physical state and their rhythm and their psychological state, and to be able to blend with that, to match with that. So instead of going like this, you go like this, smoothly and seamlessly.
mm.
So being able to really pay attention to that and to sort of develop that skill of blending with someone, both physically and psychologically, I think is another big thing that I bring over from martial arts practice. So I was going to give an example of this. If you tie with different people, sometimes you might notice that you're in a rope jam, or you're
Sure. Go ahead,
having
Sensei.
a rope session together. You sometimes you tie with someone, and even at the first time, or maybe it's someone that you've tied with before, and you just feel like you fit together so smoothly. You just fit together so smoothly. Like when you feel like when you tie them, it's effortless. Even physically, it's effortless. You blend with each other, and that's I would say that's awaseru, right? That's awase.
Ok, gracias. Bueno, entonces ahora queremos ver una visión más desde la perspectiva de Sappho, ¿sí? Em,
Mhm.
Sappho, ¿qué sensaciones supuso para ti ver por primera vez una atadura en Shibari?
So the first time I saw Shibari being done was actually by Jonathan. I did not know him at that time. It's about 7 years ago or so. And he was doing a suspension scene with a model. The thing that stood out to me most was the connection and the sensuality between the two of them. It had a very intense energy that was apparent to everybody, who was watching. And that connection, the connective aspect, was what really drew me in and made me more curious about Shibari.
Ok, ¿y cómo ha evolucionado la percepción a nivel emocional del Shibari desde su primer contacto?
Um, so I think my focus on that connection at the core has continued to remain the same. But I think ever since then, gaining more experience, I've learned that there's also many different types and moods and feelings I can bring into Shibari. And that every single time we tie together is a genuine and unique moment that you can't really experience the same again. It's like the saying in terms of you can't step into the same stream twice. I think that sort of flow and energy that you bring into each moment is just very unique to that moment. But I think at the core, my connection has focus on connection has remained the same.
Ok, gracias. Bueno, hay una metodología y una filosofía que maneja el sensei Jonathan y es sobre la kata, ¿sí? ¿Nos puede comentar un poco los pensamientos sobre el papel que tiene, la importancia del papel que tiene la kata al atar?
Sure, sure. I think there's for certainly many people have different thoughts about how to do shibari or how to learn shibari and these kinds of things. And I don't think there's any one correct way. I think whatever works for people is great. Having said that, I have my own thoughts about this. And the way that I learned different kinds of Japanese cultural arts is through what is called kata. So kata is a word that essentially means form, right? Form, the shape of something. And the traditional way in Japanese culture that things are often taught is the teacher will do something. Maybe it's painting something or swinging a sword or how to arrange flowers or how to tie someone up in a gote, right? The way this is done, the idea here is that the teacher provides an expert model, but often does not give a lot of explanation. The student is expected to work very hard at imitating that model with a very active mind, really trying, not just going through the motions, but as they go through the motions, trying to do it exactly the way the teacher did it, and to think about what they're doing, and to try through many, many repetitions, come to understand what is important about the form, what is the form teaching them. So this method is how I learned classical Japanese martial arts and a lot of how I learned rope. A lot of the things when Sappho and I teach workshops, our private lessons, we explain many, many, many fine points about why things are being done. But when I learned a lot of Shibari, I was not given these explanations. I had to figure them out for myself through repeated practice of the form. So when I say the form could be futomomo or gote shibari, a TK, or doing some kind of suspension. So my own approach tends to be very strict in that way. I, spend a lot of time trying to really do it the way my teachers did it. And the idea here is that eventually you come to have a deep realization about what the form is trying to teach you. And after that, you can start breaking the form on purpose. You can start exploring other alternatives. And then after that, you start making up your own forms just spontaneously because you understand what the form is trying to teach you and you have gained that knowledge. Then you can invent new things with it. So I think one of the challenges about the method that I just described, if you try to apply that to Shibari, is you have to think about making, for example, making the Takate Kote work on different bodies. Every body is different in terms of flexibility and body shape and all these kinds of things. So for that reason, it's not enough to just say I will do A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. That's not good enough.
Mhm.
You have to learn to tie different bodies, tie the takatekote on different bodies in a way that works for their body. So for this reason, it's really essential that people understand the principles of time and not just form.
Ah, Sensei, para nosotros en la revista Mail en Latinoamérica es muy importante la formación académica dentro de todo el marco de lo que abarca tanto el BDSM y las prácticas que hay alrededor de ellas. Y por eso nos gustaría preguntarle sobre su formación en Tokio, eh, más a nivel de su aprendizaje al lado de una figura importante dentro del Shibari como Kinoko Hajime, ¿sí? Entonces, nos gustaría saber qué movimiento, qué lección dada por el sensei lo marcó a usted de una manera más profunda.
Mm, mm. I can think of two things especially, and the first one was the first time I visited Kinoko Sensei in Tokyo was in the summer of 2015. I had already been practicing Shibari already, but I wasn't his student yet. So I went to visit him in 2015 and just slept on the floor of his rope studio and did many hours of lessons with him. And one thing that really stayed with me after all these years is we had been he'd been teaching, we'd been working on something, I don't remember what, so maybe a technical day or something. And after class was over, or maybe it was a break, we were sitting around on the floor, tying up ropes or something. And he commented to me, he said, Jonathan, when you tie someone, after your ropes are on them, they should be more beautiful than before you tied them. And if they are not, then your rope needs more work. You're not skillful enough yet. And I thought that really stayed with me. This idea that instead of saying, "Oh, I can't do a strappado because my model's arms aren't flexible enough," or "My model should be a certain shape, or a certain height, or a certain width," that's a really not a good attitude. That if you really want to be an artist with rope, you have to look at each person. You have to really see that person and say, this is how I should tie them to make them beautiful for them. So that's the first thing. There's two things, but that's the first thing he told me that really stuck with me. The second thing, and this is not a teaching per se, but the Japanese way of teaching is often by example instead of saying something. So it was a lesson just by me being there and getting to see it. Kinoko Sensei was doing a photo shoot in Tokyo, and there was a photographer there. He was not photographing. Some professional photographer had come in and hired him to do this photo shoot, and some professional model came in, and I was there assisting. By which I mean I was like passing Sensei ropes or something, right? While he tied.
Mm.
And this model had never done Shibari. Never done Shibari. She was not a rope model. She's a regular model. Very beautiful woman. And Kinoko Sensei tied her in a gote Shibari, TK, right? Takate gote Shibari. And then they took pictures of her for an hour. Like an hour. Her arms stayed behind her back, tied in a gote Shibari for an hour. And when she came out of it, he said, "How are your shoulders?" And she said, "Oh, I'm fine." And what that really speaks to for me is what Kinoko said to me in that first thing I said, and that he is so sensitive to her body that he was able to have her arms behind her back comfortably for an hour. That's a tremendous level of skill, right? And it's because he is sensitive. He's not just tying A, B, C, D, this is Kape Kope. He's tying it perfectly for her. Yeah, that really stuck with me as an example that I should try to achieve myself.
Qué excelente. Eso es un excelente consejo de vida, además. Bueno, ¿y cómo fue tu experiencia
Sí.
de pasar de alumno de Kinoko Hajime a ser un instructor senior?
Sure. You know, I think of things like that maybe a little differently. I've been teaching rope for a while. Kinoko Sensei gave me a senior level. There are different levels of teaching license. Sensei gave me the high level teaching license in 2019. But I've been teaching rope, teaching Shibari on my own since, maybe 2013 or something. I'm doing it for a while. And I teach for most people that I teach sort of my own rope, my own ideas about rope, which of course are very, very, very heavily influenced by Kinoko Sensei. And then for a very small group of people who are very serious and want to follow that path, I teach Kinoko Sensei's exact curriculum, the Ichinamakai curriculum. There's 10 levels. But what I was going to say is I don't think of teaching licenses or instructing authority as, if I put this, I don't see it as like a big public rank, like, a public thing, or you're an official instructor and that kind of thing. What permission, in a Japanese context, what permission to teach means is your teacher trusts you to represent them. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Your teacher's saying, I have a reputation, I have a face, and I trust you to represent me. And that takes a lot of faith in each other and a lot of connection, a lot of time together, that kind of thing. It's not the certificate. So that's what's important. That's what's important about it. I would say it didn't change. Getting a teaching license didn't change anything for me in terms of teaching because I was already teaching. But it was very clear to me that this is a serious thing and that I need to not embarrass my teacher.
Entiendo. Bueno, con respecto al tema de seguridad, ¿sí? Seguridad en la atadura, ¿cuáles son los 3 errores más comunes que observa en esta materia y cómo hace para corregirlos?
I'd like to really pull a lot. I have my own kind of thoughts about this. I mean, the questions and that kind of thing. But I think it would also be really, really great to hear from Sappho about this, because not only is she very, very experienced receiving rope, but she's watched people do a lot of rope for 7 years. Do you want to think about that first? Do you want time to think about it? Okay. So I'll chat about this, and then hopefully maybe Sappho will have something to say. So what are the 3 most common mistakes in terms of safety? Things to watch out for, things to improve upon. The first is that I think people probably don't check in. The people tying probably don't check in enough with the person being tied, to assume that because the person isn't saying something that everything's okay. I think that whenever you're tying, no matter how sexy it is or how intense psychologically it is, even if you're very, very, very psychologically and emotionally involved, some little like 10% of your brain has to be standing outside watching, always watching the person you're tying. I think ideally you should know, like, for example, maybe the person's shoulder is starting to hurt. If you watch their breathing, if you watch the way their body is tensing or relaxing, if you watch their face, a lot of times you should know. You should know before they say anything. You should already know, there's some kind of issue. And so you should watch them very, very closely. So I think it's the first thing is just not communicating. That also then goes on the side of the other person being tied. They need to be, the person tying them is not psychic, not a mind reader. So they need to make sure they're communicating. The second thing I would say is a really common mistake is forget. Is it okay to keep talking? The second one is, I think people tying need to be aware that ropes will change position and change tension sometimes. Because you're thinking about, especially if you move the person's body around, as the body shifts a little bit, maybe the arms are moving or you're turning. If the shoulders roll in, for example, then the rope might become looser, like a ticket, and these kinds of things. So I think you have to treat a tie like a dynamic object instead of a static object, especially in suspension, but also on the floor. So even if you tie, for example, even if you tied Takate Kote Shibari and you were very satisfied with where the rope is on the arm, maybe for whatever reason it shifts, it changes positions from a good place to a bad place, or it was tighter or looser. Our goal is to always have the ropes not move and not tighten or loosen, but things happen sometimes. So it's very important as you're tying to keep an eye, to remember. You can't just like say, oh, I tied it in this place and now it's fine. You have to keep an eye on it and make sure it's staying where it's supposed to, and that will help avoid injuries, especially nerve injuries. So that's the second thing. I think people just don't really continue to look at the position of the bands. And I think the last thing I would say, and I'm sure lots of people all over the world would agree with this, is a very common mistake that could be a pretty dangerous one for injury is attempting suspensions without a sufficient technical base, without a sufficient understanding of how to do ties well on the ground. So sort of rushing into doing suspensions too soon. Before I still have the next question.
I don't know.
Okay.
Before we go on, I think I have some things to contribute to the prior question about safety first. I think there's increasing awareness of injuries, nerve compression injuries that can happen in rope. And there are more and more resources specifically for rope that tell you about anatomy and things to watch out for. However, I think almost every single resource, website, or book that I've seen has either misinformation or incomplete information. I think at the end of the day, what matters most, because there's a lot of variation between individuals, is for the person being tied to monitor for symptoms conscientiously. So this means monitoring for any change in sensation like numbness and tingling. I think many times people underestimate how important even the slightest change in sensation can be, and fail to speak up. I think that is probably one of the biggest safety concerns I have from the standpoint of the person being tied.
Bueno, en cuanto a la comunicación verbal, no verbal, Sappho, ¿cuáles han sido las señales no verbales más valiosas para usted durante una sesión?
For me, from an emotional standpoint, and I think this will be very personal to each individual and each person that you're tying with. For me, when I tie with Jonathan, for us, eye contact is very, very sort of important in terms of maintaining and intensifying sort of our connection. I do know that I'm not purposely, trying to communicate with changing my breathing pattern. I think it's just something that happens, during rope, especially if it's intense, or if we're undergoing a lot of changes in the body. I do know that the breathing is something that Jonathan pays a lot of attention to, and keys in on to notice that be a change of some sort. But I think for us personally, I think our gait and maintaining eye contact is quite important. That's from an emotional standpoint.
Ok, a nosotros nos ven muchas personas que apenas están aprendiendo sobre la temática y nos gustaría que de pronto desde el punto de vista de modelo le diera un consejo a esas modelos nuevas, a esas personas modelos nuevas, para que aprendan a hablar sin palabras, a expresarse con su cuerpo, con su...
Mhm. So in terms of, I want to say two things. I think in terms of trying to communicate something to your partner, I actually think that verbal communication is very important. And that sometimes you may be thinking, you may be trying to express something non-verbally, but it may not be interpreted. I think even in verbal communication, there is much confusion and misunderstandings all the time. And I think that gets multiplied, can get multiplied when you're not speaking verbally. One exercise we sometimes do in our workshops, when we teach workshops, is after a tie, for the two people, for the person tying and the person being tied, to sit together and talk about that tie, what they thought, or what each individual thought the other person enjoyed, the most, or didn't enjoy the most, and sort of share that with each other. And during these exercises, we often find that sometimes people sort of misread signals, like all the time. So I think after, a time and session, actually having a conversation, talking about that afterwards helps develop sort of the nonverbal vocabulary between two individuals. So I think this is something that sort of develops for each time pair over time. The second thing I want to say is from an emotional expression standpoint, I think a lot of it has to do with just complete surrender. When I'm timed, and sort of our most intimate and intense sections, I'm not actually actively thinking about how do I express my emotion. I try to be in the moment and try not to put any barriers up and just open up my heart and allow myself to be vulnerable. I think everything else stems from that.
Gracias. ¿Puedes compartirnos una experiencia en la que descubrieras una nueva sensación corporal cuando fuiste atada o gracias a ser atada?
Hmm. Um, the type of rope that Jonathan and I like to do can be very intense, often described as seminawa. Often a lot of pressure on the body, a lot of contortions. And I think that I've been through positions and situations that I've never thought that I would be able to handle. Um, and that's sort of an interesting journey that we've had together. Um, I think otherwise rope can be very cathartic and bring out a lot of deep emotions. And I think it allows me to be vulnerable in ways that I've never thought was possible before.
Gracias. Bueno, la siguiente pregunta es para el sensei Jonathan. ¿Cómo equilibra el deseo de impresionar al público con la necesidad de crear intimidad con Sappho?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a good question. You know, early on, I've been performing for about 11 years. Performing for about 11 years on stage with Shibari. And early on, I was really thinking about how to impress the audience. And as I've become more and more experienced, and especially Sappho and I have been performing together for a long time now, right? I think it's safe to say, I'd like to hear what she says about this, but I think it's safe to say that I don't think about doing a performance to impress the audience. I think about doing something really sincere with Sappho, and the audience is allowed to voyeur that, right? They can peek, But when we perform on stage, it's real. Like it's real. It's not a fake BDSM scene. It's real. I would say that the only exception I make to that is that I'm thinking while I tie about making sure that, for example, the position of my body does not block the audience's view of Sappho's body. So I'm thinking about where I am in space to make sure that the audience can see Sappho. And of course, because I like being dramatic and I like being on stage, I'm maybe making my movements a little more dramatic. My movements are a little more dramatic than they normally would be. But and I think the last thing I would say in terms of the intimacy of Sappho and I versus performing on stage is that for me, I make the fact that we're on stage part of our intimacy, in the sense that there's different ways to think about BDSM, there's different ways to think about kink, there's different ways to think about Shibari. And one thing is what you might call exposure or objectification, to make someone an object. So part of our BDSM dynamic is I'm going to make you my beautiful toy on stage in front of all these people, right? And you just have to suffer that. They get to watch you suffer. Yeah.
Ok. Bueno, pasando a otra pregunta, Sensei, ¿cómo defines llevar al límite consensuadamente?
You know, I think everyone has a different style, but I think my style, I would say, is like a slow burn. If you think about putting in, I don't know, like a crab into a pot of water, you don't suddenly, like, you don't pour boiling water into the pot. You slowly turn up the heat. Maybe if you're thinking about like cranking something down tighter and tighter, you don't do that. I don't do that suddenly. It's always like a slow, steady increase in pressure. Maybe the way I think of it, like a boa constrictor, like a boa constrictor, a python anaconda, right? As it wraps around and just slowly tightens. Also, for me, I think it's important to give the person I'm tying time to. This is going to sound funny. Time to feel what they're feeling. If you're always thinking about just tying, then the person you're tying doesn't have time to experience it really. So sometimes you just have to let them sit with it, sit with whatever you're doing, and that also increases intensity because they are just for one reason they might be thinking, oh, I'm suffering in this for a long time and it's getting more and more difficult. It's getting to be harder to breathe, or the ropes, my body's getting tired. But I think also I like to try and do it in a way that the person can see me watching them. And so it's a difficult thing for them psychologically to suffer just like someone watching a bug. It makes them feel strange things.
Ok. Bueno, ¿qué protocolos de seguridad activas cuando exploran ataduras para evitar riesgos verdaderamente reales?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Yeah, for example, protocols as RAXA, is consent, like is safe.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
protection.
I think it's very, very important to negotiate consent
Mhm.
and desires and boundaries before any rope goes on the body. And one of the things that we practice and also is really important when we teach is to always tell people that once any rope has gone on the body at all, you, as the person tying, you would never make any additional requests, right? So if I've already tied the person at all, like maybe just a simple piece of rope on the waist, doesn't matter. I can't, whatever we have negotiated about what we're going to do before the rope goes on, that's what we'll do. No, even if the person seems perfectly normal and able to speak, I don't think it's okay to make additional requests of them. Does it make sense? Okay.
Absolutely.
And I don't.
Jonathan, yeah,
The other thing I would say is,
yeah.
I think it's important to remember that if you're doing rope well, if you're doing a good job tying, it's very easy for the person being tied to forget to check in on their body because they're in a different headspace, and so they might forget to do hand checks or something. So I think I, as the person tying, have to remember to make sure that they're doing those things.
Ujú, sí, claro que sí, así es.
Yeah, something that Jonathan does that I found helpful, and I think he does often, is during the negotiation process, ask specifically, how will you tell me if you don't like the way something is going? Um, and because the first time he asked that, I was like, oh, I had to think about it. And I think practicing how to say no, or I want to stop, or this is not working for me. Before rope goes on, helps you do it when you're at a more emotional, vulnerable state.
Could
I think it's hard to do it for the very first time when something is actively going wrong.
If the first time you have told the person, no, I want to stop, is when there's actually a problem, maybe it will be very difficult to say no, or I want to stop. So it's actually good. It sounds weird to say, but it's actually good to have the person rehearse saying no to me before we start tying.
Bueno, con respecto a las actividades de motivación y de disciplina, ¿qué nos puede recomendar? ¿Cómo mantiene usted la disciplina de práctica diaria en su propia rutina?
You know, I think, what was that saying? Motivation is optional, discipline is not. Yeah. So there was a this is gonna sound kind of funny, but there's a mixed martial arts fighter. I can't remember what his name is. He's a short Irish guy. You'd recognize his name if I said him. He said something one time that I thought really summed up the way I was taught in Japan about martial arts, and that was that your motivation may come and go. Your motivation may go up and down, but your discipline must not. So if you only practice when you feel good about practicing, you will not really improve. You have to practice even when you don't feel like practicing. So yeah, that's the, I would say that's the Japanese way, right? If the weather's nice outside, go outside and swing your sword. If it's raining outside, go and swing your sword. If it's snowing outside, go and swing your sword. So in this way, you could just say something more simple about tying a single column tie around your ankle. If you just have a simple goal like I will tie 30 single column ties around my ankle every day, People expect to make really big jumps or progress from, for example, taking a workshop and that kind of thing. And I think that taking lessons and doing workshops is very important for having someone give you new tools or look with a critical eye at how you can improve. But most of the progress is just practicing every day. Practicing every day. You can make it like a ritual, you know, like it's, I get up in the morning and I have my coffee and I practice, 15 single column ties on my ankle. And then before I go to bed, I do another 15. I want to say one more thing. I will add to that I think the biggest issue for everyone, and this is true and probably in everything, music, martial arts, Shibari, everything, is that people don't want to spend time on the basics, on the fundamentals. They always want to learn the next pattern, the next tie, the next extension, or the next song on a guitar, or the next kata in a martial art. But the reality is that unless your fundamentals are really good, if you know 20 ties, they'll all be terrible. But if you understand the fundamentals really well, then anytime someone shows you a new tie, it's just like that. You just don't like that.
Perfecto. Sensei, con respecto al tren, sobre todo de tener un maestro único versus tener varios mentores, ¿qué ventajas y desafíos ve usted en aprender de un solo maestro frente a recibir orientación de varios mentores?
And if you want to speak to this as well, Sappho might, after I speak, Sappho might have things she wants to say. I would say that part of the one teacher, one student idea, it's partly cultural in Japan. And that's just kind of, that's, you're not a customer. You're not the customer of your teacher. You are the disciple of your teacher. Either you think their learning is worth doing and you're going to commit to it, or you're not. And I would say this is also common, like for example, I don't know how it is in Colombia, but in the United States, if you were learning guitar and you were studying with two different guitar teachers, probably not one of them would be very happy about that. And not because necessarily they're jealous, but they're like, if you want to get serious about guitar, you have to pick a way to do it and practice that very intensely. So that's part of it. And part of it has to do with sort of group identification and teacher loyalty and these kinds of things, very strong values in Japan. But I want to talk for just a minute about why is this such a strong value in Japan? And that is the role of the teacher and the student. So I think we tend to look at the amount of respect that is shown to teachers in Japan and go, wow, that's really intense, and I just want to learn from different people. But especially with a traditional way of teaching. Remember when I said that often in traditional teaching you don't get a lot of verbal instruction? The reason for that is that if you are actually that teacher's student, if you're actually their student, not just someone taking lessons, but you're their student, then they're actually watching you all the time. All the time. You don't know it. They're watching you all the time. And they're thinking very carefully about when to show you the next thing, where to make corrections, these kinds of things. You don't realize they're watching you. They're always watching you. And it takes a tremendous amount of investment of time and energy to teach someone like that. It takes a lot of investment of time and energy, and more than money can pay for. More than money can pay for. You realize if you've ever been a student under this traditional method that your teacher spent a lot of time and energy on you. For that reason, teachers are held in great respect. They're like in a traditional teacher-student relationship, your teacher is almost like your second parent. Like your second mother or father. And in fact, in Japanese culture, traditional Japanese culture, it was very common, even up to the 20th century, for your teacher to help you arrange your marriage. to help you find your first job, after college. Does that make sense? So that's just a little bit of cultural background there for why the Japanese would be very serious about, hey, you're studying with me, or you're not. But don't go around. So the advantage to this is that when you think about a class, you're not in a class. You have a one-to-one teacher-student relationship. Even if you're in a group that's learning and there's 10 people learning from that teacher, you're in a one-to-one relationship with that teacher. And that leads to very deep learning, I think, right? You're probably going to spend a lot of time around your teacher, so you're going to learn lots of things that are not just the Shibari technique, not just, the tie goes in this direction, the kate-kote is done this way. But if I'm running errands, with Kinoko-sensei, or helping him out on a photo shoot or something, I'm spending all day with him. And I'm watching the way that he prepares his ropes. I'm watching the way that he interacts with clients. I'm watching the way that he interacts with models. And I get to see that because I'm there with him, right? Obviously, as someone who's a long-distance student, I don't get to do as much of that. The students that are there full-time in Tokyo get to do that all the time. But even when I'm there with him, that matters. So that's the advantage of that. Kind of deep learning and a real relationship with someone. The disadvantage. Is this okay if I keep talking?
Yeah, keep going, Sensei.
Okay. The disadvantage is that there is a lot of cool stuff out there, and you may not, get a chance to learn it. And that's just, that kind of is what it is. In Japanese culture, this sort of is what it is. I would say that there are definitely exceptions to the rule. The Japanese culture is gray. It's not always black and white. And there are definitely exceptions to the rule. So you might have a situation where you train with a teacher, and then the teacher might give you permission to go study with someone else, or it might be because of whatever your situation is. It might be due to your particular situation. The teacher might not say anything out loud, but they might be, might realize that you're also studying with somebody else, and that's okay. So the advantage of having multiple teachers is that if you're going to different workshops by different people, if you're going to different workshops with different people, you're getting to learn all these different techniques. You're getting insights and tips and ideas, creativity from all these different teachers, and that's really good. That's a really good thing. I would say the challenge is, are you getting actual deep learning, or are you just learning a different tie? That's the thing, right? It's very difficult to explain this to Westerners, I think. Sappho's nodding her head because, from Asia. And there's kind of a shared cultural understanding here, is that there's shallow learning and deep learning. And deep learning is best accomplished by teaching, ideally, with learning from one teacher. Do you have anything to add to that? Obviously, I think from this interview, you realize that we're going to say that you should focus on the fundamentals. It's so much better to learn how to do a single column tie and what I call locking off bands. If you can do, there are only 4 basic techniques in Shibari. Only 4. It's the single column tie, locking off bands, making a band, like the top and bottom band of like a kate-kote, hojo cuffs, and double column tie. There are no more techniques besides that. Every tie you can think of, no matter how fancy it is, only has at most those 4. And most ties only have 2. If you think about Futomomo and Kate-kote Shibari, they both contain the same technique. Steel called tie and locking off bands. Steel called tie and locking off bands. So many ties in Shibari only have those two techniques. So if you practice those two techniques, steel called ties and locking off bands, then your ties will be good. But instead, if you try to learn 20 patterns and those things aren't good, your Shibari will not be good, right? So the other thing I would say that I think beginners should really focus on is remembering why you're tying. If you're only thinking about patterns, that's pretty boring. We think the purpose of Shibari is to communicate with our partner with ropes. So you have to remember that when you're practicing, this is important for beginners and important for advanced people, especially for beginners. When you're practicing, nothing should ever be good enough. You should be very strict with yourself. Very strict with yourself. Nothing should ever be good enough. And you should be focused on the rope, what the rope is doing. But when you're playing with your partner, when you're playing in ropes, everything is good enough. As long as the rope is not dangerous, everything is fine. If you're tying your partner, tying with your partner, and they're really enjoying it, they're really having a good time, and then you realize, oh, my ropes are crossed, my rope is twisted, and you stop to untie it and fix it, that's terrible. You should just enjoy tying with your partner, and don't worry about it. Having things be perfect is a practice. And in play, as long as it's safe, don't worry about it. Just enjoy. I think it's very important. I think Sappho.
Ok,
Listo.
ok. Bueno, y por último, pues obviamente queremos agradecerles. Se ven una pareja muy comprometida con el Shibari, de mucha formación, de mucha complicidad. Se les nota demasiado la complicidad que tienen ambos, que es muy importante para que todas nuestras relaciones en general pues funcionen de una manera correcta. Y por último quisiéramos que nos contara un poquito de Portland Shibari, dónde los pueden ubicar y por supuesto sus redes sociales para que la gente los siga.
Sure, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. We are Portland Shibari on Instagram and social media.
Ok. Ok, no, de verdad, cordialmente invitados a la ciudad de Cali, en el momento que gusten a pasar. Los esperamos y de verdad muchísimas gracias por el tiempo, por la paciencia, por esta entrevista, por darnos su sabiduría y sus conocimientos sobre esta temática. Ok, y para todos nuestros seguidores, para las personas que nos ven, para los principiantes en las temáticas BDSM y Shibari, esto fue un espacio más de academia, de aprendizaje. Esperamos verlos pronto. Chao, 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 chao.